Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome. Before we begin, we'd like to introduce ourselves. I'm Charlotte McGuire, Director of Product Management for Epam Systems. Epam Systems is an S&P 500 company with 55,000 employees worldwide. We specialize in professional services for engineering, product, and strategy. I myself have over 20 years product management experience to include co-founding a startup company, working for hypergrowth environments and enterprise companies alike. So before we begin today, we just wanted to give you a quick disclaimer that all three of us are very happy with our current companies. We all have great managers, and that's why we're able to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'll introduce myself next. Hi, everyone. I'm Deepa Chen. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm a group product manager at Capital One. I lead 6 teams focused on platform resiliency. I am really one of those people that truly believes that you can enter product management from almost any discipline. I myself have a very diverse journey to product. I started off with my own business where I wore multiple hats. I learned through a lot of trial and error and actually came out of my shell. I was very introvert, much an introvert, and I came out of my shell as I was forced to actually make strategic partnerships. I joined the United Nations Development Program after that, and there again, I moved overseas for the first time, so was able to experience new things. I learned even more about developing relationships there, as well as diplomacy and negotiation skills. From there, I went into management consulting, where I focused on strategy and business development through managing and growing relationships. You'll notice that I've mentioned relationships in each and every one of my experiences. I really do believe that as product managers, relationships are core. They're really central to who we are and how we do our work. So relationships with different functional areas, with our teammates, with our sponsors, with our stakeholders, and with our managers, they're all critical to our success. And again, I'm very excited to be here today, and I hope this is the start of many new relationships for all of us.
And speaking of relationships, Deepa, I think that's all three of us match through the Women in Product community. It's truly an incredible journey. My name is Evelyn Cho. I work at Coursera, and Coursera is an edtech company with 3x year-over-year growth. What I do there basically enables that product-led growth, which then empowers over 100 million learners around the world through online learning. And besides that, I have 15 years experience across different industries, tech companies like Uber. I build data products. I launch marketplace features in different countries and cities. And when I reflect on my career, it's truly a combination of growth, impact, and to Deepa's point, a lot of relationship building and community. And that's why I'm super pumped to be here and share my experience with you all. Now, before we jump in, we would love to hear from you. Now, take a minute and drop in the chat about the first thing that comes to mind when you heard the word micromanager. It could be an emotion, it could be a reaction, or just a word that comes to mind. So take a moment and type down your answers. And once you do that, I would encourage you to grab a cup of coffee, it could be your favorite beverage, or if it's late enough for you, some popcorn. Because what we are about to discuss might seem very stressful for some people. It was for me when I had to go through it. And that's why we want you to take a deep breath, sit back, relax, and join us on this journey. Now, let's come back to what we are here to talk about. Deepa, I don't know if you remember, but last year when I was in transition, I reached out to you several times asking for your advice to work with this manager who really didn't have any product or analytics background, but the way of him managing me is really intense. I just didn't know why there wasn't any micromanaging guidelines, like how to work with a micromanager, as if the concept itself is a taboo. Why do you think that is?
Evelyn, I so agree with you. I remember those times. Definitely, they're very vivid in my memory about you reaching out. I think so many of us suffer in silence, and it's unbelievable. I had gone through micromanaging experiences myself, And I thought I was all alone. And then when you reached out, I'm like, I've seen this before. I've seen it before in things I've experienced as well as things my colleagues have experienced. And I'm wondering, why do we suffer like this? Why are people continue? Are they allowed to continue to be micromanagers? I mean, it really hits on our self-esteem. It demotivates us. It really takes a toll on mental health because it keeps chipping away at you. Managers like this with almost have their claws in you, and it keeps chipping away until you lose productivity. You don't want to be there anymore. I don't know, Charlotte, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I totally agree. Having a micromanager just zaps all your power away, takes all your energy, all your time, and it stymies your ability to grow and move further in your career for sure.
Yeah, and if I may add a twist to the micromanager concept, I do think micromanagers are made, they are not born. Nobody wakes up in the morning and decides, I'm going to become a micromanager and make everyone's life miserable. Nobody would do that. And that's why I think it's so important to know the different behaviors, different patterns, and even different ways of navigating through those behaviors. Because self awareness would make us more resilient, observant, and even if you are an individual contributor right now, ultimately, all of these traits will help us become a better leader.
If you start to think about, what are the reasons that people are do micromanage, and I guess we could say there are some justifiable reasons. It surely doesn't make you feel any better. But if I'm a new employee and I'm working with a manager I've never worked with before, is he or she going to give me all that responsibility and just trust me to do that job, even though I've never proven myself to them before? I mean, it's probably not reasonable. It's probably reasonable for them to want to micromanage. I mean, that's probably one. And then another one is perhaps somebody's on a performance improvement plan and needs to be micromanaged.
Yeah, so Deepa, that's interesting. So is it managing or micromanaging? And that's kind of a blurry line and hard to tell the difference sometimes. So yeah, I mean, so I wonder, when we got together and we were talking, we started developing a framework, the ACT framework. So we decided it was always good to start with assess, because starting with assess, you assess your situation, and that helps to determine, is it micromanaging, is it not micromanaging, where are you at? The other two pieces to the framework we came up with on this ACT framework was assess your situation, to create a plan, and then finally to take back your power, because micromanaging can really zap your power. So starting with assess your situation. Um, Next slide, please. So starting with assess, yeah, assessing your situation, like we said, it's good to kind of like take a step back and go, okay, it feels like this person's after me, they're controlling things. Is it me? Have I really done something that needs to change? Otherwise, is this really a micromanager situation? And if so, how do I deal with things? And it was really interesting. We got together, and Evelyn, you came up with this other really great framework to help assess this. And would you walk us through that?
Thank you, Charlotte. That probably tells you how many micromanagers I had to work with to come up with this framework. And then to circle back on the types of micromanagers, I do wanted to reflect on the micromanagers I had to work with. I normally would categorize them in two different types. The first one is those who cannot see the forest for the trees. Those are the type would overly indexing on the technical details. They would be very granular, asking about the house, forget about the what, like what problems are we trying to solve. And then the second type I normally see is called professional backseat driver, just like normal backseat driver, those that got on your nerves. They try to insert their agenda in everything that you do and almost like constantly check ins, always want an update. It's really not fun. So the framework that Charlotte was talking about is basically look at the situation by two different dimensions. The first one is trust, which is the horizontal axis. I would ask myself, how much trust or rapport do I have with the manager? And then the second question, the y-axis is the dilemma. Basically, how long do I think the situation is going to last? Is it going to be permanent? For example, I just joined this team and this manager probably isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Or it could be temporary. A good example would be rework. When I was at Uber, there were tons of reworks. And initially there were a lot of swirls and anxieties, but luckily things do die down. So based on those situations, then I would decide what course of action I wanted to take. I can either give feedback, that's F. I can adapt and work with this manager, that's A. Or I can mediate, find a support group or a trusted advisor to make the situation better, that's M. Or I can decide it's really not worth my time, I'm just gonna exit, that's E. And even though being micromanaged is no glamorous work, I like to remember this framework by its action, FAME, so the FAME matrix.
I love this fame matrix. It's great. If I look at where I was, so several years ago when I had this micromanager, he was a brand new people manager. So he wanted to prove himself. He wanted to exert power. He felt that, hey, being elevated in his role as, um, a, basically a global product manager, even though he had no people experience, people management experience, he thought, oh, everybody should, try to please me. Everybody should do what I say. And he was a nightmare, especially after I told him that I want to move to a different role, and it became retaliatory. So there was this retaliatory aspect of it, but there was also an insecurity aspect of it, where he found if somebody's not doing what they say and not, doing their begging, forget it. You are not a good employee, and I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that you fail. So for me, that was more of a permanent situation. And as far as trust, nothing there whatsoever, right? So I was definitely and very clearly in the exit quadrant there.
Deepa, I am so sorry to hear about that story. That just does not sound like any fun whatsoever. Evelyn, I think I only had one real micromanager, and it was later in my career, so I knew the behavior that I was seeing wasn't normal. I can tell you on this quadrant, I went all the way around, starting with feedback to mediate, adapt, and exit. And kind of like Deepa, I had a manager who wasn't a product manager. I think he was very curious about what product managers do. Wanted to watch me while I was working, and I can tell you that's not the best way to learn about product management. Would give me deliverable timelines that would normally take a week and ask for it in a day so that he could have a week to review it. And then even went so far that he wanted me to do documents online, not to collaborate, but he wanted to be able to watch and make notes while I was working. Let me tell you, that's not a good environment to work in. But yeah, I think I started with the feedback. And in the feedback, I communicated with him that this wasn't normal management behavior. And it was really kind of funny. His response was, yeah, a lot of my employees tell me that, what, you don't trust me to do my job? And that's kind of your sign. We had a conversation, unfortunately, nice human being, but couldn't change his behavior. How about you, Evelyn? Where were you at?
It's really hard to say. I think I'm in similar situation. I went all over the place, but I really like what Deepa was saying. Sometimes it feels like retaliation. When I was working for this manager, he would constantly check in on me, and we are talking in the intervals of every 10, 15 minutes. I could be on another floor meeting with my scrum teams doing stand up, and he would text me, message me, just wanted to see where I was. I know it sounded naive, maybe to some people, but he really made me feel insecure about myself. So I think I tried couple things. I try mediate. I try to hint at him that this kind of management style isn't really working for him. But I guess I just couldn't really find a way to find someone who can help me through the situation in the beginning.
Evelyn, that's horrible. I do remember you going through that a little bit. And I think as part of this assess your situation, we always tend to look externally. Let's also look at ourselves. You said, yes, it's very stressful. You felt, you were feeling a little bit insecure. It was chipping away at your self esteem. Take stock of where we are, breathe, try to get a little bit of room. Sometimes we just think, well, I got to tough it out. I got to tough it out. This is the way it is. But I would beg to differ. I think we need to take stock of our mental health and physical health and see what sort of toll is taking on you. Because if it keeps chipping away, it is this chronic sort of thing. And that really does go along the temporary to permanent. How long can you stand this? And is it worth what you're going through? So take assessment of your own personal health as well.
Absolutely. Well said, Deepa. So, I mean, it's well and good. I mean, we assess, but it's also helpful to take action. If we're going to take back our power, we need a plan, right? And we're going to take back our power. So, creating a plan and choosing action, when I look back on my experience, wasn't like I sat down and did a plan and did things. I adapted as we went around. So, looking back at your framework, Evelyn, I think I was sharing, I started with the feedback section. I started with the assumption that maybe there was a miscommunication, started talking to my micromanager. Clear that didn't work. One of the issues that I was dealing with was that he would change to deadlines constantly, would give me one deadline and then move it up. So I started to communicate really clearly. And in part of that process, what I did was I mediated with him. And by mediating, I communicated, I said, hey, look, I can make your deliverables in a short period of time, but they're either A, not going to be as big as scope or quality, or I can't do as many. But that'll give you the time to review things. How do you want things to go? And actually, he wanted that control to be able to review things. So that was fine, but still needed to communicate with him. So I put everything in writing in an email every time we had a conversation. And I learned this from a wonderful executive coach that I had, that she explained to me that accountability is like giving someone a gift. And that's what I did with my manager. I actually ended up micromanaging my manager by emailing back and going, okay, so we talked about such and such and agreed to this. And so that was my adapting. But things, this was taking my evenings, every waking hour, wasn't getting work done. It just wasn't a good situation. So I started to create my exit plan. And my first exit plan was to exit the company. But at the same time, I was building relationships inside the company and was able to ultimately exit to another department. So I love your framework. I was able to adapt and move across that.
Yeah, for me, to take the example I was using before, I reached out to someone else in the company who was chief of operations, and I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't be managed like this. I'm not being able to do my work. I'm not able to grow the business at the client firms, and I'll be leaving. And he said, no, don't leave. We can figure something out. And very quickly, he was able to move me under his organization. But I knew that wasn't a long-term plan. I knew it's a small enough company that this is just not going to work eventually, because I'm going to have to keep dealing with this other manager I had. So I did make an exit plan to exit the company. But what this gave me when I did move organizations is it gave me some breathing room. It gave me some peace of mind. It gave me some freedom to actually make the moves that I needed to make.
I love both of your advice. And I remember there's a book called The First 90 Days by Michael Watkins for those who join a new company. And I think you all should write a book called The Last 90 Days for those who wanted to get out of a toxic situation. And when I reflect on my last 90 days for the manager I talked about, um, I think besides constantly checking in where I was, he would seize every opportunity to make me feel small and bad at my job. So the first 90 days, I think initially I spent a lot of time agonizing, internalizing, which you would not see any of those recommended actions in the matrix, because I think we all do that. We are our worst critic. And I sort of convinced myself that I'm not good enough, like I'm not technical enough. And if I worked harder, like even harder, if I learned some technical skills, maybe I could come across smart in front of him. So the first 30 days, I taught myself R, Python. I even got myself like AWS developer certified. And guess what? He didn't change. He didn't even support the idea that I wanted to advance my skill set. So that's when I realized I need to pivot. So I spent the next 60 to 90 days reaching out to people, mediating the situation. In the meantime, figuring out an internal and external exit plan, because it's better to have multiple options. And eventually, I had a job lined up that I absolutely fell in love with at Uber. And you know what? Besides these like last 90 days plan, I also did something that I think is incredibly brilliant, which is I take on kickboxing. So I went to a kickboxing studio and I just started punching and kicking. I no longer work for that manager, but still until today, I absolutely love kickboxing because when I'm doing the workout, I feel powerful, I feel confident, I feel I'm in control.
I love it. I love it. And I have a very quick story about me and boxing as well. When I was in consulting, I had this very difficult client, and every day was a negotiation. Every day was a little bit of a battle. Every day was trying to convince them and going, you know, kind of driving them uphill. And so I registered for this boxing class at New York Sports Club. And so I had this personal coach, and I was like pretty petite, pretty, small in stature. And I'd be punching away, and the guy looks at me and says, "Man, you've got a lot of aggression in you." I said, "Yeah, try working with my client and you'll be the same." But it was such a great release. And you're absolutely correct. I felt empowered. I felt like I'm in control of this because so many situations we feel we're not in control of. We can't let people say, keep chipping away at us and tell us we're not good enough. Often the problem is with them, right? And I think that's one of the telltale signs of a micromanager is someone who demands so much stuff that they can't do themselves, and they demand it of you, knowing it's very unreasonable. And proud of you, Evelyn. That's fantastic. You're able to do that.
You guys both really took back your power. Talking about kickboxing and self-care is really empowering, and that's amazing to hear that both of you guys did that. So I'm really curious, like having gone through those experiences, we often learn that really challenging situations can make us stronger, better professionals. And I'm really curious, what have you both taken from this experience to make you better professionals? Do you have anything that you took along, any muscles that you built long term that you have with you today?
Well, I can start. I think self-advocacy is one of them. The other thing is really reaching out to people who were influencers of my manager. And this was a different company, but I reached out to people who I was able to develop very good relationships with. They were influences of my manager, so it was the chief of staff, chief of operations, and or the head of finance. And they spoke with my manager and kept saying, "Hey, you need to take a look at what she's saying." And soon enough, he did a 180, and people started saying to me, "Oh, your words are coming out of your manager's mouth now." And I knew something good had happened. Now he's one of my greatest champions. I was able to move on in the organization, and he's, was supporting me for promotion. So it really did turn around.
That is outstanding. How about you, Evelyn?
Well, I mean, besides these precious biceps I built from those kickboxing classes, like those are truly like biceps. I also develop, I would say, a mental muscle that is to reframe my situation. I wish I had known back then that no matter how dire the situation it might seem, that I always have a choice. And if you all take anything away from our fireside chat, I want you to remember this, that you, me, Deepa, Charlotte, we all have a choice. We can choose to rise to the occasion, have a frank conversation with your manager, or we can choose to find the next one who truly appreciates who we are and what we can bring to the table. Because that's the thing, when you realize that you always have a choice, That's when you can truly take back your power.
Well said, Evelyn. I think that's the ultimate take back your power is when you know that you have control. A little bit like Wizard of Oz, you always realize that you have the control and the power. I would agree with that, and I also agree with what you said too, Deepa. Those relationships are so important. I've learned that it's not just when you have a bad situation, but by building those good relationships both inside the org and outside the org, like building relationships with you guys and other people I've met with women in product has been so empowering and opened up many, many doors, not just when I have a bad situation, but also when times are good, and how incredibly important that is. And then I think the other tip I would have is documentation is your friend. Don't be afraid to hold others accountable in a nice way, give them a gift. Um, but yeah, other than that, we are so glad that you all joined us today. We're really hoping that you gained a tidbit or two from our experiences and hope that you build some positive muscles as well going forward.
Yeah, and please, as far as relationships, know that you're not alone. Don't take this on yourself. Don't suffer in silence. Reach out to friends, reach out to any of us, reach out to the Women in Product group. We're all there to help you. So many people, 80% of people have been through micromanaging. So share your stories.
And just last plug, don't forget to join us on the live Q&A in about 30 minutes. See you there. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.